approach for solution. The first thing which you need to do is create a dependency graph. What is this dependency graph? Let me try to show it to you. Okay, so now I have an nginx. Okay, but for the nginx to run, it might depend on rabbit mq. Okay, and it might also depend on Oracle database. Okay, my rabbit mq might be depending on, okay, my nginx might be depending on redis server. Okay, redis might be depending on Oracle database. ఈ ఒక్కదాన్ని ఎందుకు వదులుతాం, ఇది కూడా గీసాను. Okay, I'm not saying that this should be the order, but every software, every server will depend on some other server. Yes or no? Yeah. So we have created a dependency graph. We have said that okay, nginx to run might require rabbitmq to work. Rabbitmq to work might require, yeah. So now, which server should I migrate first? Nginx. You should always migrate a server first which does not have any dependencies. So in this whole stuff, what is that which doesn't have any dependencies? Oracle database. So if you really want to migrate, first migrate Oracle server. Why? Because Oracle will run on its own. It is not depending on anything. Then try to migrate whatever is depending on Oracle so that you can test them individually. This is a common approach and you have to follow this in any cloud. Okay, so I'm telling this because, right, quite recently I thought that this is sheer common sense, you should know this answer, right? And last time one of our student has gone to an interview and they have given saying that okay, in your migration what is the first server which you have migrated? He said nginx. Okay, that's the reason why I'm telling this explicitly, because whenever you are migrating, you should always take servers which do not depend on others, right? So clear on this? Yeah. So do we understand what a dependency graph is now? Yes. So what does a dependency graph help us in deciding? Order of migration. Yes. To decide on order of migration. Clear? Now we know the order. Fine. And now we want to do the migration. So the next thing, sorry, the next thing which you need to understand is migration approaches. We have three possible migration approaches generally if you go to any cloud, right? So the first one is, okay, physical to virtual migration. Whenever you come across this term called as P2V, that means that your source is a physical server, which means in this image nginx is running on a physical server, but in cloud everything is virtual, right? You are doing a migration from a physical server to a virtual server, that is P2V, right? And then you are already running them in VMware or in Hyper-V, so that is virtual to virtual migration. It is called as V2. Okay, migration approaches for, okay, I'll call it as virtual machines. Okay, or for operating systems. It is a better word. Okay, right. Now, but that is not it. If you see over here, we have Oracle database and we have a, and if you remember yesterday, we have defined something called as service. We have defined something called as a service. Okay, so generally I will call as database migrations. Okay, check for the possibility to migrate to service. Okay, so in the case of Azure, we have something, in the case of AWS, we have something called as RDS, relational database service. So you don't need to migrate this whole VM. You can just migrate whatever is running in this Oracle to the Oracle which is on the cloud. You can evaluate that opportunity also, right? If it is not supported, you will do it as a VM migration. Okay, so for databases we have two options. What is that? Don't think of database, think of it as a virtual machine and migrate the VM. Or since it is a database, why do you need to migrate the VM? Okay, Amazon lo kuda databases unnai, right? Just migrate the data which is present in your database to the database which is running on the cloud. So here we have two options. One is you can do VM based migration, then it is no different to what we have discussed earlier, or you can go with VM. Same thing we can do for Redis also, because Redis is also present on the Amazon. So for whatever you are migrating, if there is an equivalent service in Amazon or whatever cloud which you are trying to basically go, try to look out for an opportunity to migrate to that. Am I clear on this? Okay, so then the fourth one is possibility of PaaS or Docker kind of platforms. So what is that you want to run over there? Nginx, right? So what is that important? What is that is important for me? Is the server important for me, or what is running inside the server is important for me? So if something which is running inside the server is important for me, why am I migrating the whole stuff with operating system? Why don't I just migrate the application? That is this approach. I think in the Docker class we have just now discussed why applications are important, right? So for that case, what you can do is, for whatever application which is running inside it, either move to Docker technology, or in case of any cloud, we will have something called as PaaS services, where you directly get execution platforms, right? So why don't you move to that? So the option is this. These are the four approaches. Okay, first is try to evaluate, try to create a dependency graph which will tell you the order of execution. Second thing is, if you are doing a physical machine to virtual machine migration, it will have a different steps, and if you are doing a virtual machine to virtual machine migration, then you will have different set of steps. That's the reason why we are finding out. And if you are basically trying to migrate something like databases, generally you might have an equivalent service on cloud also. Cloud లో కూడా అలాంటి సర్వీస్ ఉండొచ్చు. అలాంటప్పుడు మళ్ళీ మొత్తం సర్వర్ని తీసుకెళ్తాం ఎందుకు? Why don't you just take the data? And the fourth option is, if you think you just application is important for you, why are you taking the whole VM? Why don't you just take your application? That is the fourth step. Am I clear on this? Yes, does it make sense? And this you can apply to any migration which you are doing. Even tomorrow, let us assume you go into the office and you start working on Google Cloud. These steps do not change from Google to Amazon to Microsoft, right? Clear? Okay, right.